Hey everybody, it's Professor Snart checking in as we are just getting back from spring break. Hopefully you had a good one. I imagine that some people did probably some traveling and some fun stuff, but I know lots of folks are working and working for school and working for a job and all that kind of jazz too. So let's take a quick look at our due dates. We are really jumping right back into it. As you know, we are in the midst of our post-spring break first drama unit in our kind of drama section of our Intro to Lit class. So jumping right back in with some, I don't want to say it's difficult material-wise. In fact, the play that we're reading is fairly short and fairly, I would say, readable. You can kind of understand what's going on pretty easily. But definitely because of the nature of the assignment that we're working on, there is some logistics to take care of sooner rather than later. We do have our usual due date system going here, so keep that in mind. And as you all hopefully know from having looked ahead, or not even really ahead anymore, we have some groups made up. Again, fairly small class. The groups are a little bit bigger than we've worked with in the past, just given the nature of the assignment. So again, just logistical challenges I think are more difficult than engaging with even the content here. But what the assignment that we're doing I think is really hopefully fun and interesting, but provides a really I think productive way to be to learn about the play that we're reading, and to sort of engage with the themes and ideas rather than, again, just that more traditional approach where we read the thing and everyone writes their individual essay and whatever. Okay, so the reading assignment itself, there's a play, there's a little work analysis just to sort of help you with some of the thematic stuff. Again, very small point quiz. Again, the purpose being largely just to draw your attention to certain things that are going on in the play. You'll see that it's mostly about gender kind of dynamics and that sort of thing. And it's a really great play for us to study because not only can we read the text of it, but because that theme is so much about like gender or even like power dynamics, it's really important to think of it as a staged production and how production companies or acting troops, and now you guys as your own little production companies have to think about, like, how do you want people to see this as a way that will help to communicate what's actually going on in the play. So again, it sort of probably sounds obvious, but theater doesn't just happen by chance. The lines that people memorize are as scripted as like where people stand on stage and where the furniture is placed, and that kind of stuff. And it can look very natural when people are moving around on a stage, but if you know anything about the behind the scenes of that, especially with really sort of full professional productions where there's lighting, there's maybe sound or audio cues, the actors have to move to certain places. In fact, if you look at rehearsal stages, you'll see pieces of tape, spike marks, they're called, like little X's that are taped out at different places on the stage so that the actors learn where to move to and where to stand at what times. It's actually much more controlled than a lot of people maybe realize. And if you've ever done theater, you'll know that how scripted it is, not just the lines, but all of the physical movements. In traditional theater like this, obviously there's like improv that's a little different, but that's not what we're dealing with here. So again, hopefully you've read the assignment, which in some ways is pretty straightforward. You're just picking a section of the play, clearly not the whole thing, to stage and film yourself, your group, performing. Or if you don't want to have people on camera, thinking of a more creative way to have something on camera. But again, we really want to think about ways that the primary themes in the play can be communicated in ways that aren't just through the basic text. We need to think about setting and staging and things like lighting and what's called blocking, like where people stand or how they move and all that kind of jazz. So it's really pretty fun, actually, at least for me anyway. And obviously if you're short people, you don't have enough folks, you can conscript friends or family or whoever you want to be involved. we want this to be fun, right? And, you know, not like a super tense or high pressure situation. Everybody wants to do good work and get a good grade, etc., but it should still be fun. So if someone doesn't want to be on camera, you know, we don't want to force that person to be on camera. There's other things that people can do, other ways to even stage the thing where if you have a whole group of camera shy people, then you can work around that. Keep in mind that the videos that we're producing, you could even host it in your Google Drive space. It doesn't need to be out on YouTube. Again, we know that even if it's on YouTube, there's ways of making it basically unfindable. And we understand that these are to be used within the context of our class. We don't go sharing them out to other people so that they do become much more public beyond our class, unless that is something that the whole group has agreed is okay to do. But I'll leave that to each of the groups. The presumption, though, is that they're private to our kind of class space here. Again, you should have been in initial contact with your group from really before spring break, as far as providing like an email or a text or agreeing to a method of communication. We're back hitting the ground running on Monday here. I know it feels like a lot to get caught up with in terms of sort of getting back into the groove of school after being out for a week, but you really do want to think about getting together with your group multiple times, perhaps, if that's feasible to do. Something else to consider is that we don't have to film this all in one shot, or even necessarily have all of the people in one place together. If that proves just too logistically difficult, or you find out that people live really far from each other, maybe COD campus is a better kind of central meeting place for people. There's rooms like in the library you can find to work. There's obviously just sort of the open spaces, even outside, whatever. And I can help with any of that logistic stuff. But you need to be doing that stuff now, not Wednesday, trying to figure it all out. What I was going to say, though, is if it really is problematic to get everybody together at once, consider filming in chunks where you don't necessarily need all the people. And then you'll have to have someone or a group of people kind of do more of the video editing side if you're going to do it in those smaller pieces to build them all together. I've actually found that, you know, cell phone technology is pretty good for filming. The one downside still is capturing audio from a distance. The video quality is great. It's usually that audio that's a little trickier. So you can think about ways around that too. Again, it's challenging logistically. I get it. I know that. It can be challenging from a technical perspective if you've never done this before, but it is meant to be ultimately kind of fun. Like, God forbid we have fun. So try not to let the stress of the logistics, of working in the group dynamic, of maybe figuring out how to make the technology work the way you want it to. Try not to let that all get in the way of, you know, sort of enjoying yourself and having fun thinking about how to stage this, you know, portion of Susan Glaspell's play called Trifles here. Okay, so that actually is just our first foray into the world of drama. I'm going to jump into our next couple of units really quick here. There was a little midterm feedback that's, again, just like an anonymous, ungraded thing, just to see how things are going. So if you haven't done that yet, take literally a couple of minutes and do it. Always good for me to know how things are going. All right, here's our next one. We'll be reading the famous To Be or Not to Be soliloquy, short speech, from Shakespeare's Hamlet. Even if you've never read the whole play or seen a movie version or whatever, you've probably run into this very famous monologue. Even though, in my experience, it's like one of the most kind of well-known or often taught or often studied, let's say, but also misunderstood brief speech in maybe all of like the Western literary tradition. So it's important that we not just read it, but actually understand what's going on. The Shakespearean language can get in the way a little bit, but again, just read it a few times. There's a brief work analysis I'm asking you to do. It's of the whole play. And then there are, I'm strongly recommending that you watch a video version of Hamlet. There's tons to choose from. There's really long ones, like the Kenneth Branagh one from the 90s, I think it was. This bad boy runs like 3 or 4 hours. It's awesome and amazing, and I'm not just saying that as like an English professor nerd. It really is great. I could go on and on about the staging of the To Be or Not to Be scene, but I won't. And there's a whole bunch of other ones. David Tennant, he was a Doctor Who for a while, if you happen to be a fan of that show. A surprising Kevin Kline performance, I think better known just as a comedic actor. But he did his time as Hamlet. Good old Mel Gibson, I almost said Mel Brooks. Who's not everyone's cup of tea necessarily, but I would actually say that this Hamlet version is fairly watchable. It runs like a normal movie, like an hour and a half or 2 hours. It gets the gist of the story across, the gist of the Hamlet character and kind of everybody else involved, so it's pretty watchable. In fact, if I'm remembering right, the guy who plays Claudius, the main bad guy in this, is actually a very famous Shakespearean actor who became famous actually playing the Hamlet role. And I'm really fascinated when you see someone like in a big budget production here playing a different character, but opposite the character that he would know inside and out from performing it as a Shakespearean actor. I mean, the kind of depth of knowledge you'd have about the play and the characters is just really, I'm kind of like jealous, honestly. The Laurence Olivier one is really famous, but it's definitely a product of its time period, so you'll have to kind of deal with that. It might be really compelling for people, but you'll notice that it's a little different. Anyway, watch a film version. You could certainly read the Hamlet in its entirety from our book, but it's a long play. It's all in that Shakespearean language, which we're not really taking time to understand how to read. You can get into it after a while, but it does take some getting used to. And like, the truth be told, even Shakespeare would say, why are you reading the play? He would say it differently, but you get the point. Like, it's supposed to be seen, not just read off the page. So there's nothing wrong with watching a movie version. Of course, the closer to the original it stays in terms of retaining lines and characters and the general plot, the better, but hey, it's meant to be a performed thing. Okay, so that's kind of like the whole bundle of getting us into Hamlet, and specifically the To Be or Not to Be. And so our assignment here is to really just do like an analysis of the various versions that I've provided here, but thinking a little bit just like we're doing for Unit 10 in terms beyond just the lines on the page. So obviously you have to understand what they mean, right? So that's really important. But now we want to think about all of those choices, those production choices that are made, again, really intentionally. It's not just fluke that the lighting is the way it is, or that a character is dressed the way that, in this case, he is, or any of that other stuff, like where the camera is. It doesn't just like move because the camera guy's like, hey, I think I'll do this now. It's all like a carefully controlled kind of a thing. So we want to analyze the content, but really in terms, like the thematic content, but really in terms of all of this other stuff, and how even, the same character, quote unquote, delivering the same lines, quote unquote, it creates for us a very different experience of like who Hamlet is, even how the play works in terms of Hamlet being its central character, who is maybe gone crazy, maybe just pretending to be crazy, maybe in some middle space between those things. And again, the To Be or Not to Be is quite literally him thinking about suicide, to be in the world or not to be in the world. And so one of the little clues I'll give you is that when he starts talking about taking up arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them, this is the misinterpretation that I've seen so many times. People are like, oh yeah, he's really like bucking himself up and he's going to take on the world's challenges. No, he's talking about killing himself. That's how you don't have to deal with the world anymore, right? That's not to be, okay? So we always want to choose to be, just FYI. Every time you wake up in the morning, you are choosing to be, and that's a good thing. Okay, so think about what the lines mean as part of kind of the prep work here, but then all of the different actor choices and director choices and et cetera, that go into creating the character. And your assignment is really just to like pick a, I don't want to say favorite because that's not really it, but it's kind of hard not to do that. Where you think the choices of delivery and all of this jazz speaks most compellingly to you, in terms of like communicating the line by line content most effectively. There's a little note down here again about picking a favorite or kind of not. I know it's really hard not to, but I guess what I would say is don't let the production value determine your favorite or least favorite. Like the glossiest, most sophisticated looking one becomes the one that you like because it like looks the best on camera. Especially some of the older ones, some of the less, HD ones, they just don't look as good. So try not to let that figure too much into your choice. And then I'm going to have you look ahead to Unit 12, which I'll jump into just really quickly here. It'll make a ton of sense following from Unit 11, and to open the possibility for a group option. Totally optional, so if you're into it and you've sort of connected with someone in the class, you have a great idea for doing it, you can totally go that route, but it's not required. So I'm not going to make groups, there's no group assignment, anything like that. And you're doing basically the same assignment as what we'll find in Unit 12, which I'm going to look at just really quickly here. So Unit 12 is actually our last of the 3 drama units, and we are going to be performing and recording our own to be or not to be monologues. Again, you don't have to be physically face on camera if you don't want to do that. You can think of other creative things to show, but you'll see how this obviously follows from our analysis of the filmed versions, because we want to think about those same things, like how can you stage and even perform this in a way that evokes what you think the most important kind of like thematic or character elements are from the lines. So maybe you're not going to memorize it, so you got to think of a creative way to deliver it. Maybe you can memorize it. People do all the time. Production, or not production, but sort of like film editing, how much of that do you want to get into? Again, if you do this as a group project, what I'm inviting you to do is build some new lines, either before or after the speech or interwoven in the speech. So instead of just Hamlet on screen, we actually have other characters, ones that you totally invent. And they don't have to speak in iambic pentameter Shakespearean English. They can be completely contemporary if you want. So again, just sort of like a fun, creative, challenging way to engage with one of the most studied, but I think also most misunderstood soliloquy monologue in the whole maybe of Western literary tradition. Okay, so that's looking way ahead, but again, I want to have it on your radar because there is that group option. So if in doing the unit, 10 now, filming the group play Trifles, if you really connect with someone, maybe that's a good opportunity to follow up for Unit 12. Okay, long announcement. Welcome back from spring break, but at least it carries us through our next few units here. So I'm really looking forward to what people do for all of these units, but especially Unit 10, since that's the one that's right in front of us. Again, logistics, get on that now, setting up meeting times, meeting places. Let me know if I can help. And I know that it's probably stressful for probably all of you, maybe to slightly different degrees, but try to really have some fun with it as well.